5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio. Live from the heart of the downtown east side, it's Talk Recovery Radio with Giuseppe Ganci and Darren Gaylor on Vancouver's Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. From the streets to the studio, bringing you addiction recovery stories from real people with lived experience and real experts on today's issues. Tune in live every Thursday, noon to 1. Powered by New West Recovery. Real people, real issues, real life. Talk Recovery Radio.
Good afternoon, Vancouver. Hello, this is Giuseppe Ganci, and I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Darren Gaylor. Hey, Darren.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk Recovery.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Good to see you, Darren. 7 seasons, hundreds of guests, thousands of listeners. We're not in studio at Vancouver Co-op Radio because of COVID. We're trying to get to that post-COVID world where we go back to the studio. So special thanks for Zoom letting us do this live here and then rebroadcast on 100.5 FM, powered by Glassdoor and Westinghouse. Okay. I'd like to start off the show with what's going on. Yesterday was the 5th anniversary of BC's claim to the overdose crisis, and lots of things going on yesterday. Demonstrations, protests, conversations. They were handing out drugs in the downtown east side, like pure heroin, pure cocaine, pure crystal meth. And
They were not.
Darren, what do you mean? Aren't you on Instagram? What are you talking about? It's all over the place. And like literally like pure stuff, pure cocaine. I mean, I remember the days of having pure cocaine. And you know, we're not going to get into like all. I remember probably, you know, having some pretty good pure cocaine, and like my life still wasn't great, but people are dying. So, you know, whatever conversation, whatever side of the fence you're on, in that conversation about safe supply is now become about actual street drugs being provided by taxpayers. I don't know if people know that.
No, obviously not.
Yeah. So does Canada...
You would never even think that that's...
Yeah, I mean, we were told that safe supply was going to be, you know, medication, pharmaceutical grade of the drugs, crystal meth and heroin and fentanyl and all that. But no, it's changed. It's like we want street drugs paid for by taxpayers. I don't think people know that.
That it has to be something that an intravenous drug user can shoot. Like, that's what I don't think people are going to understand. They're probably going to assume it's in a pill form. It looks exactly like the medication you would get yourself at the pharmacy, you know, but no, that it has to be something that an addict can
yeah, and the version of safe supply isn't good enough that we have. So now it's straight out street drugs, and you have lots of moms with dead kids, you know, pleading for the government to do this and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen over the years. But yesterday I was on CBC, which was, you know, nerve-wracking because it's really difficult to say anything in today's world, especially on a media channel. You know, I think our show's great, but it's a humble show, you know, not huge like CBC. One day it will be. But it's like, you know, you'll just get killed on Twitter and Facebook and stuff for saying anything that's not status quo. And, you know, I just really wanted to, show that there needs to be a true investigation into why our version of European harm reduction models aren't working. And no one's done that. I mean, all these dead people, and no one is saying, hey, like maybe we should take a look at what we've been doing for 20 years. Because if you look at Portugal's overdose numbers, since they implemented their recovery-orientated systems of care, which is their Commission of Drug Dissuasion, and the 4 pillars approach in other European countries, overdose and addiction rates have just gone down. Canada's hybrid version, lesser version is what I'd really like to call them. You can even go as far as lazy version. addiction rates and overdoses has just skyrocketed. Europe has COVID. We have COVID. Their overdose rates, compared to ours, aren't the same. Europe has ports. I remember somebody told me, oh, Portugal's not a port city. That's why they don't have a heroin problem. I'm like, how could you even be an advocate? Like, you don't even know that there's an ocean next to, Portugal has a port. They don't have a demand for heroin. I don't know all the answers, love it or hate it. It's just my personal opinion. And I'll end it with this. It was in the CBC interview. I know somebody works in an OPS. He says he needs help because he's got addiction. Guess what?
What's an OPS? Private
treatment paid for within 48 hours. Somebody that goes to that OPS and says, hey, I want to stop using. Medication for life, get in line, go on welfare, don't try recovery, it might kill you. Completely opposite streams of conversations. And until we figure that out and get rid of that social classism, we're never going to get out of this overdose crisis. Never. So bottom line truth, happened last week. So
there it is.
There it is, yeah. Why should that healthcare worker get private treatment at a private abstinence-based treatment center within 48 hours, but the patients, oh no, here's a condom, here's a needle, here's some safe supply, just go away, Go to your SRO. So that's my rant for today, and it's how we talk recovery. We start with the truth about what's really going on and why we have, after 5 years, even more deaths. So I hope Sheila Malcolmson, our Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, is listening, because I've had this conversation with her many times. So anyway, that's Talk Recovery Radio's beginning. We are bringing on a guest. Kraft is on the conversation today. I'm excited about this because I've heard about it and know some of it, but I'm not a clinical counselor, so I don't know much about it. So I'm going to learn. Darren, who are we talking recovery with today?
All right. Well, we get to talk recovery for the whole rest of the show with our next guest, Dr. Robert J. Meyers. Welcome to the show, Dr. Meyers.
My pleasure.
It is an absolute pleasure having someone with the history and background that you have. You're just going to have to sit still and be quiet for the next little while I read, some of your accolades and history. You've been in the addiction field for 39 years. You've associate professor of psychology. You began your work with the community reinforcement approach in 1976, which the Kraft family training was featured on the award-winning HBO series, featured in Oprah magazine. You're an internationally known speaker, 15 countries around the world. Dr. Meyers has published over 100 scientific articles, co-authored 5 books, one of which we're going to talk specifically about today. I read your resume, or it's called a vita, right?
Yeah.
That it's when it's too big to be a resume. 32 pages long.
And I stopped putting stuff on it about 8 years ago.
I was going to say, so a PhD in psychology, master's, bachelor, let's go right back to the beginning. What was it that as you're going through schooling, as you're deciding what it is you're going to be, what led you into the addictions treatment field?
Well, if you look at Get Your Love When Sober book, it'll say at the beginning a little bit of why I got into the field. My father was a horrible drinker. My mother was histrionic and bipolar and used to beat the tar out of me and my brother, that kind of thing. So it was a pretty crazy. So I joined the Navy at 17, went over to Vietnam, and I was on an aircraft carrier that they actually had a couple of bombs go off on it and kill a bunch of people. But then I came home and I started going to school on a GI Bill. And I started thinking of, as I was learning, back in the 70s, and it was, I did a placement at one of the state hospitals, and I was seeing how they were doing alcohol and drug treatment. But I kept thinking of my mother, about how horrible her life was. She died at 45 years old. And so I learned with Dr. Nate Azrin, who worked with B.F. Skinner. I'm a behaviorist, but I'm a real passionate guy besides being a behaviorist. And so I used to do couples therapy that CRA taught me back in the 70s.
Okay.
And so by the time I was 78 or 79, I started thinking, well, you know what? Some of these women, they got a little influence still over their husbands and stuff. And back then it was mostly, wives and husbands. And things are different today. But again, the same. I use the same stuff almost that I did those years ago. So I started a program as craft, but I called it something different back in the day. And I didn't get to the University of New Mexico for quite a while. And then I had good luck. I was recruited by the University of New Mexico to work there. And the first guy I met was Bill Miller, and he's the motivational guy. And so we worked together. And so we started doing the clinical trials to see whether this would really work. And I won the Dan Anderson Research Award in 2000, and I think it was 2 or 4 from Hazelton Betty Ford Centers for having the best article in alcohol and drug treatment in the whole United States. So I was very honored.
Wow.
And I went up there and I gave this is the true story. I had the president of Hazelton laughing and crying throughout my original talk because I talked about my family. And then I talked about this, and I talked about that, and having dinner with her. And she said, "Do you have any books?" And I said, "I've got a book, Get Your Loved One Sober." I didn't call it that. I called it basically a little something different. But the bottom line is, yeah, I have a book that's been rejected about 8 times, and it's been sitting on my desk because I'm afraid to send it off again because I get so many rejections. And she said, "Can I have a copy?" I sent it up to her, and the next day after she got it, she says, "We're going to publish it." And that's how I got Get Your Loved One Sober, alternatives to nagging, pleading, and threatening.
So that makes me wonder, like, what was it at the time that your book, didn't have the respect, or to go. I mean, obviously, was it mainstream? It was something new. What was unique to that approach?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, Darren, because I think back when I started doing the craft stuff, it was so new. It was like new technology. It's sort of like, we get new phones and we get new this and that nowadays, all this stuff. But there's also new innovations in addiction treatment and so on. And so a lot of the people here didn't use it or like it that much, even though it was on HBO and, Hazelton published the book. And I remember in the early days, years ago, that there was a professor in Ireland who used one of the books I wrote with Bill Miller. It was all on research, but it was on craft and so on and so forth. And so I started getting all these calls from these people who graduated his class with masters in social work. And all of a sudden, I'm going to Ireland 2 or 3 times, a year. I'm going to the Netherlands. I'm going to Scotland. And I've been in 6 continents. Wow. The only place I haven't been is down where the penguins live. And if they got a problem with alcohol and drugs, I'll go down there and I'll talk to them. Kind of thing.
They are a tight-knit community.
Yeah, absolutely. But in the last 8 or 9 years, people started catching up with the new technology of craft and so on. And
so let me just get our viewers. Craft, it's community reinforcement and family training. So this is essentially, I don't know if you tried to stay out of the semantics of being, it categorized as an intervention approach.
Yeah.
But is that what it is?
Well, it is, but I don't like to use it because I don't like to get it mixed up with the one on A&E television in the United States where they just cream people and they're mean and horrible. And that was one of our control groups. The first study we did was strictly with alcohol abusers. Okay. And believe it or not, what we did was I got people who were Al-Anon and AA people who worked in my at the university. And those people then did the control group, which was a form of Al-Anon, where they kind of actually then added some things to that. And I know Al-Anon wasn't originally meant to get people into treatment, but nevertheless, it's the only thing they had. And we also used the Minnesota model, which really sucked. And we hired people who were trained in Minnesota, and they had a psychiatrist who was their supervisor. And then I used nothing but graduate students. I mean, 25, 27, 28-year-old kids, basically. And we blew their socks off. And so then we started doing with alcohol, and then with drugs, and more with drugs. And then we created a group method as well. And I've been involved in all of that. And I've been involved in trainings all over the world. And I've been involved, I'm still involved with people like Harvard, the university there. They're using my Get Your Level Sober book for family members who have a child or a young adult who has schizophrenia. And they're getting good results by changing the way they interact with the people who are, I mean, that's a long-term problem. And to get them to take medication in this is really difficult. And also a lot of people who do have schizophrenia, they still use alcohol and drugs too. Just like, a lot of people who don't have schizophrenia.
So Dr. Meyers, I have a question for you. So it's you've been around for a while. You've seen the systems grow, the pendulum swinging back and forth on, what works, what doesn't work. And 5 years later, oh, guess what? That does work. And you're kind of like on this swing, and it's kind of like the same conversation over and over again. So, I work in a rehab center. I don't do clinical care. I'm more of outreach and so forth, but I am, listening to what's going on. And we get a lot of calls where, this recovery coaching, which is a new industry now. I agree with it. I think we need government funded recovery coaching for families, but there's two kinds of systems out there. And your new book is called Motivating Substance Abusers. Okay. So I just want to stick on the word motivation. It's almost like there's this new mantra, meet people where they're at until they're ready. Yeah. And it's kind of turned into this thing where unless they ask, you have no right to motivate somebody to change.
That's motivation we're doing.
Okay. Can you explain that for me? Because it's almost like in Vancouver, it's almost become illegal to make a suggestion to somebody that they should change their behavior.
Yes, you're exactly correct, Giuseppe. That's exactly. And I was just talking to another. I'm a Vietnam veteran, I think I told you, and I was talking to my PTSD therapist from 20 years ago the other day, and she was saying the same thing you're saying. What is this crap? You have to get permission to ask somebody a question and something, and she doesn't like it either. And so I love Bill Miller. We're going to have lunch on Thursday.
You like who?
Bill Miller, the guy that did MI.
Hey, I met him. He came and talked at a conference I organized. Okay. I'm like, Bill, you're going to have a most wanted sign pretty soon in Vancouver if you're not careful.
Well, I started with CRA, and Nate Azrin had us being compassionate and not judging people and not yelling at people and not confronting people back in the 70s. No one did that kind of stuff. And so as far as MI goes, I think it's gone too far. I mean, way too far, because, with craft, we have happiness scales. And we list all these different categories of somebody's life: spirituality, family work, this, that, and the other thing. And you can change the categories. And what we do is we let the client pick what they want to choose on at any given day that we give them that form. The idea for me is you've got to get somebody, to keep coming in to have success. And so what I train everybody, whenever I train CRA or craft or anything, you say stuff like this. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do while you're here. And the funny thing about that is they only do what the hell they want to do anyway. So what it does is it relaxes them. It says you can pick and choose what you want to do, what days you want to use them, and what forms, so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to do is continue to spread that kind of compassion and support. And we even have things like happiness, not happiness skills, but we teach people communication skills. And the first thing we tell them to do is use a certain statement, an understanding statement. I understand things have been difficult. I understand things have been hard. That's a show of compassion. That's what that is. You're letting them know that, geez, Jesus must be really hard for you, as opposed to saying, I can't answer your question, so I'm sorry. Or if you're yelling at them, like a lot of therapists used to do back when I was a young guy, doing therapy back in the 70s and 80s and stuff. But compassion and trying to keep things positive. What happens a lot with clients is they always talk about what they don't want to do. I want to try to get them to talk about what they do want to do. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to go back to juvie. I don't want to go back to this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to get in a fight, whatever. So what would you like to do? And what would you like to change? It's up to you. Because I never suggest anything unless we're doing type of things that we use is like problem solving, you know? And the whole idea is to help them learn there's all kinds of different possibilities that you can choose to do and different ways to go in your life. So what would you like to work on? And again, if someone uses and they smoke a little dope or they, you know, a little high or they're this or that, I don't kick them out. I said, that's ridiculous. And like you get phone calls all the time. I remember in the old days, they're still doing it in America, is that, well, wait till he hits bottom. I don't like hitting bottom. I want to get them into treatment before they hit bottom. That's what craft is all about. You know what I'm saying? People between 2019 and 2020, the overdose rate in America went up about 40% during the pandemic. And so we can't wait until they hit bottom. We need to move now. And that's the same thing in Europe, same thing in Scandinavia. Craft, like, it's mandated in Sweden. You have to use it if you're going to work with family members, because we get so many people around the world, wherever I've been, who have the same problem. There's a woman crying, her husband did this, he's drunk, he stole the money, he's not working, the kids don't have shoes on. You know, that's an epidemic, and it's been that way for a long time. But trying to use interventions that are mean and horrible, and they're like a surprise party kind of thing when you come in and there's all these people. Why do you think that you will motivate somebody by telling him how horrible he's been for the last 5 years or something?
Right after the biggest surprise of their life, where they, you know, completely closed down.
Yeah.
And so this, I mean, the full title of the book, Motivating Substance Abuser to Enter Treatment, Working with Family Members. Now, is this book, is this information for the regular family member that's struggling to find out what to do, or is this training for therapists and clinical?
The two books on craft that I've written, co-written with my colleagues and one with my wife. So the first book, Get Your Love When Sober, you know, alternatives to nagging, pleading, and threatening, that was written at an 8th grade level. Okay. And we did it at an 8th grade level so we could have more people understand it. And there's no psychobabble. I don't use terms like certain things that I use with the professionals. I keep it very simple. I have a lot of things about talking about a roadmap and which way you want to turn. And we make it very, very simple. And this will give you a little information how powerful that book is. We did a clinical trial, and one group got craft in a group. So half of the 50 people went and got the group. And the other half of the 50 people, we just gave them the book and said, read this, good luck, see you in 6 months or something, right? Oh. And here's the deal. When the whole study was over, and this was with graduate students, they got 71% of the people in the experimental group into treatment. But the people who just read the book got 40% of the people into treatment, twice as much as we did with Al-Anon or the Minnesota model when we did our studies. So, and I've gotten calls from people all over the world saying, thank you so much, Dr. Meyers, you saved my son's life, you saved da-da-da. And that's what keeps me going, because I know it works. Yeah. You know, it's, you know,
it's a very powerful thing. If you're listening to us on the radio, you're listening to us on Vancouver Co-op Radio 100.5 FM. Talk Recovery Radio is coming to you noon to 1, and we're talking to Dr. Robert Meyers. Family. So it's unbelievable how many families, their only knowledge about addiction or recovery is what they find on Google and the whatever's SEO for that neighborhood. And we've been trying to like get people to understand, like, if we don't take care of families, you know, there's no way, like, and it's what you're saying. It's like that family coaching, that opportunity, you know, your 18-year-old kid just started to do fentanyl. And the only thing a family does is they go to the first doctor, and what if that doctor knows anything, 5 minutes, you know, the appointment's done. So a family member of their, we got lots of listeners that have kids that are in recovery, but we also have families that have kids that aren't in recovery. And even if they're in recovery, the problem's not solved yet. There's still lots more to do.
Absolutely.
Codependency and all that. So how does your book take a look at that, enabling and craft as well, enabling and codependency? Don't buy your kid, don't give your kid money, like,
Well,
but I love them, I have to. So where does codependency and enabling fit in your world?
Well, you may not like this, but in my
Sure.
PowerPoint and in my training, I never use the word codependency because it's been tried to get into the DSM manual of statistical, things for mental health, and there's no real proof that there is such a thing as codependency. And
Okay.
if you get a woman that comes in and she's trying to save her teenage son's life, and you say, "Oh, you're codependent, you're helping him," all that does is slap her in the face. You know what I'm saying? So again,
Okay.
we know what those terms mean, but I talk about unintentional things about. Look at, I think people should suffer the natural consequences of using drugs, and there is a natural consequence for using drugs. Obviously, they get sick, right? And so the whole idea is to get these people in such a place where they can change that behavior, and you can't do that. The CSO, especially if the CSO comes in to get somebody and you say, well, all you're doing is helping them. But there's unintentional support. And that's the way I use that. And I just say, look, I know you're giving him money to use because, and I've heard this from clients, I don't want my son to die on the streets alone by himself. And I can dig that. I understand that. That's horrible. But at the same time, you have to draw a line in the sand at some point in time. And you can do that in a positive, upbeat kind of way, as opposed to them beating them over the head because they screwed up. And here's something that people really don't understand about behaviorism. We all know what positive reinforcement is, right? If you say something, you say, "Oh, we like the way you look," that makes them feel better, right? Or if they smoke marijuana for the first couple of times and they're really laughing, having a good time, oh, they enjoy doing that. But what happens later on? So once they start getting sick, let's say an opiate user, right? He's getting high, he's having a good time, right? But what happens when he doesn't use? He gets sick. And you know what that's called? And they have to go and get more dope to make themselves not be sick. And that's negative reinforcement, because negative reinforcement takes away the pain of being sick from opiates, methamphetamine, alcohol. So again, a little hair of the dog, right? When the guy gets up in the morning, you got to have a little sip or two. Again, that's that negative reinforcement. So because the more they can use it and the more they get the dope and keep shooting it in their arms, why should they stop? Okay, so we got to teach them to understand that that's how you get addiction, right? I mean, I was in Vietnam, I smoked dope. I mean, come on, it was a big deal. I don't smoke dope anymore, of course. And I don't think it's a great thing to be making it legal everywhere in the United States like it is, because it's gonna be difficult. But again, when these people ask for help or they don't understand it, we need to give them the best information we can. And again, being a research professor for 23 years with guys like Bill Miller and other people across the country, there's lots of different ways to support folks, and I think we need to get into use AA as well as other types of methods and all those things, because that's part of the recovery system in the United States. And my thing is, I always say people who self-select into going into AA or NA, they usually do pretty darn good. They stay sober for a long time. Yeah. But there are people who don't want to do that. So that's why this CRA and other things. I think, to be honest with you guys both, that working with really people who have trouble with alcohol and drugs, I don't think motivational interviewing is a really good thing to do. I mean, if you want to work with an upper class person that makes a lot of money and he works for the airlines or he's a professor, sure, you can do motivational interviewing. But I've had three grants with homeless people and worked with them for many, many years. And again, the whole change talk thing, you know how many times I've talked to a client and say, "Oh yeah, Dr. Myers, I'll change it, I will." And they go out and get high the next day,
Yeah.
So the change.
Do you think it's because of consequences? So like if you're an airline pilot and you have, high recovery capital, you've got employment, you've got family, you've got friends, you've got probably a nice car. If you don't, follow these guidelines, staying sober, you ain't flying a plane. Yeah, but a homeless person's kind of so is. Absolutely. How do you how is it do we just stop trying to motivate somebody who may not have any type of recovery capital in their life? Like,
No,
what do we do? Do we just say, here's your safe supply, enjoy?
I think that's the biggest problem in most places around the world I've been. And again, we don't have socialized, medicine here, but even the countries I've been in that have that, there's not enough resources to go along. We need the resources, we need the money. I believe every person everywhere, I don't care about the color, the creed, I don't give a shit about anything. A human being deserves the best treatment that we can freaking give them. I don't care if they're a homeless person, if they're making $1 million a month. I don't care. We need to give everybody the best treatment and that's what researchers have done. We've created the best treatments, and people have paid thousands and thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, I should say, into grants, so we could show, it's like, how do you build a better mousetrap? How do you build a better this? And that's all it's about, is to find out what works better than that. But we know one thing in research, that there's not one alcohol or drug treatment that works for everybody. And everybody's got different shit going on, excuse my language. And so you have to be able to be flexible in how you treat those people. And sometimes, the people that have more information and then they've been to school longer and stuff, maybe they have a better chance because they have more money. So they can go to a program that costs $30,000 a month. You know what I'm saying? But the street people that I've worked with, and people, they got nothing going on. And we provided them housing and everything.
I want to pick your brain on that that subject itself. Because that's our big problem right now. Giuseppe and I came from a treatment, community-based model, therapeutic community, 12-step, was involved in that treatment process. And then, I got clean just before harm reduction, replacement therapies and all of that, basically became the norm. And now there's like you say, there's the people in the skid row, and they're human beings too. And I appreciated that you said that we all as human beings deserve the same treatment. The reality is, somebody who can afford to pay $100,000 for 90 days in Malibu isn't going to want Skid Row Joe, in the, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, that's the mindset. So what do that demographic deserve? What does the demographic of the downtown Skid Row, not many resources in their life, what do they deserve? Do they deserve harm reduction, just keep them alive, or is, like, if you could create the treatment for them, what would it look like, Dr. Meyers?
Well, I think it would be a very compassionate program that uses what each client needs to do. Maybe they like NA, maybe they like AA, maybe they don't like this, they don't like that. But the idea is, why would they stay? You just can't say what's bad, you're going to die, blah blah. They don't give a shit. They don't think about that. But what keeps them inside the building? What keeps them sitting across from you so you can talk to them? Yeah. 1995, I wrote a book on CRA, and I decided to use something called sobriety sampling, and it was harm reduction. And I didn't know that. Now I got a part-time business in Holland. To be honest with you, with another professor in there, and more people are using harm reduction because everybody can't cut down like that. In America, if you take one hit off a doobie after you've been sober for 6 months, you're a horrible human being. As opposed to saying, okay, well, come on in, man. Why did you make that choice and why did you do it? So again, get them while they're at. I mean, first of all, you got to get them so they can understand what's going on. Street people, sometimes they're really jacked up a bit and they're having a hard time just surviving. So if we could get them, and this in Albuquerque, we just opened up a whole city. An old gigantic building. It was actually a hospital. Now there's 56, 57 beds now where people can actually go and live there. And we have another whole section of small houses and stuff built in Albuquerque because we have a really great mayor here. But I really believe that we need programs that can really extend away from just people who want to make money. And that's what really bothers me about America, because all they want to do is some of these programs. I mean, I love some of the people I've worked with and I've trained some of the people. The guy that wrote, one of the books, um, in New York City, they're great friends, but they charge too much money. And it's like, how do you expect them to come in? And the guy told me, well, we charge $500 an hour for the therapy because we work with lawyers that make $5,000 an hour. Or people from, the stock market who make more than that. And so it's like, but what about the rest of the people in the streets of New York City,
One of the things though that I really like for, what I was gifted to learn is, and you're talking about the same thing, like a homeless person doesn't care, doesn't care. Like my life's like, I'm living on the street. Like, I don't like what worse could happen to me. Right. And
Right.
so, I learned, the only reason people in our community that I learned from is inspiration of hope. Like, I honestly didn't know what my life was going to be like in recovery. I had no idea. I mean, I come from a background of no therapy, no nothing, and then I got my employer sent me to rehab and I was like, what is this craziness, right? I'm out of here. But then I learned the language and the lifestyle and I was like, oh, and it gave me something to inspire to. And one of the things, I got the privilege, I organize events. This is Recovery Day behind me. And so I get to sit at some tables every once in a while, but recovery is always at the kids' table. Let me tell you, recovery is never at the forefront of any stakeholder meeting. It's always like, oh, you're the sober people, right? And I remember telling our Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, like, look, like, you got all these campaigns around the province, drugs are toxic, don't use alone. Can you just create a couple that says recovery is possible? That, like beer companies have made a fortune by making alcohol look like a beautiful woman and a beautiful man on a beautiful boat having a beautiful life. Like, think about that. Like, we live in a capitalist world. Like, I don't see any messaging that there's even an alternate choice to drug use. What do you think about that? Do you think like that's the mark we're missing? We're not even inspiring people anymore to do recovery.
Well, I do think that. And part of the problem is the general public just thinks people who use drugs and stuff are low lights and they don't want to try and they don't want to do this and they don't want to do that. But that's all baloney, really. I mean, the bottom line is those people are just like you and me, I mean, I know a lot of people have been in recovery, and I can talk about my recovery when I come back from Vietnam. And I was addicted to heroin for quite a long time. And my parents kicked me out of the street when I came back, and I was on the damn streets. So I have compassion for every human being, and that's why I said that. I don't tell everybody that, but I don't give a shit anymore because I'm retired. Nobody can fire me.
I love it.
Because I was ashamed of what I did.
Yeah.
What I did on the streets, I was ashamed of that. But you know what? I had an epiphany. I never went to anything. I just, clustered away. I left Chicago, got as far away of Chicago as I could get, where I grew up, and that was the end of it. But again, but what we need to do is help. We need to have sponsors, things on TV that say exactly what you're saying. By the way, this program here will help you get something to eat, and also try to do this for you, and they'll help you with this. And that's where the money needs to go. We don't need to put any more money back into rich people. I like Biden, but he's giving money to people who are making over $80,000 or something. We need to give that money to these people who are making $5,000, $10,000 during the, but the poor people are left out. They don't have a voice. The street people. I remember going into one of the rooms, and there was one of the clients that we put them up in the regular hotels and stuff, and other places, and she was on the floor. I said, "Are you okay?" She says, "Yeah." He says, "I can't sleep in the bed. I'm used to sleeping, on something hard." And I didn't judge that. I said, "Okay, well, whatever you want to do, So that's what we need to learn to do. Some people say, "I don't really want a job. I just like being free." I don't understand that all the way, but it's okay. I'm not supposed to understand. If that's what they want, that's what they want. And if that's the lifestyle they want, then we support the lifestyle they want. We don't have to make everybody a middle class, kind of.
Yeah, not everybody has to
Everybody
be.
deserves a shot.
That's exactly right. And it's a second and a third and a fourth, possibly.
Yeah.
Kicking people out of treatment. I've read several articles about that over my life, and I just think it's the stupidest thing ever. So the guy comes in and he's stoned a little bit. Instead of sitting down, talking with him, kind of getting him mellow out, get him to come back. Get him to come back. If he doesn't come back, he's never going to get help, whether it's a woman or a man or whatever it is. It just makes me sad that there's not enough people in our world to understand that every person in your community deserves a good shot.
That's right.
And I just want to touch on that because that's something else that we're trying to get an understanding of. There's this idea in BC where we're from, where every funded provider has to offer every known possible pathway to recovery known to humankind, and there's hundreds of them, right? Literally, and for $45 a day, mind you, they want you to do that. So it's impossible, right? And ultimately, why? So there's this idea. I'm doing a film on Portugal, went to Portugal, did this filming there. There's this conversation there where there's literally a book that the client goes through. These are 12-step programs. These are CBT programs. These are SMART programs. These are therapeutic communities. This is a program where you can use drugs. This is a program where you can't use drugs. And the client chooses. And I'm trying to instill that here. It's like, you know what, and I agree with you, if somebody uses drugs and they've chosen to go to a facility that's low threshold, they call it, then that's the case. But maybe here's the thing here, right? We have a 2-tiered healthcare system. If you're a pilot, you're going to a treatment center that's abstinence-based. But if you're homeless, you're going to a treatment center where chances are your roommate's using heroin. So why can't we have a place where it's just like you choose this facility and you know what, like it's abstinence-based, this isn't. And why can't we just compromise that? It's working in Europe.
Well, let me tell you, I go to Holland usually every year, but last year, and hopefully I'll get back again to see Hendrik and his children and do some work over there. But okay, they detox people. You can find this on YouTube. They give them 2 cans of beer every day, no matter what. The whole idea is there's a concept called self-efficacy, right? Self-efficacy means that I can actually do what I set out to do. And so you get somebody in there for 14 days. They have 2 cans of beer a day. They don't go crazy. They don't fucking go nuts, whatever it is, excuse my language. But the bottom line is, oh, maybe I can just have a couple of beers and not beat my wife up or do whatever it is. Also, Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, they actually prescribe heroin for street people that are using drugs the inappropriate way to get them back on themselves, get them a job, and move forward. That's what we need to do. Drugs aren't the question. The question is how you use them and when you use them, and if you can control them or if you can't control them. Some people just can't do it. And they just need to stop. Other people, I've had plenty of people I've worked with over the years. They went to AA for 10, 15 years. Now they're having a beer every now and then. Yeah. It's been going on for years. You know what I'm saying? So, and even some of the data coming out of Philadelphia and stuff with Tom McClellan and those people, he said over 50% of the people in the United States are misdiagnosed as alcohol dependent. They just have an alcohol problem. And that's all I talk about. I never use addiction, you're an addict or you're a junkie or you're any of that shit. You got a problem. Okay, let's fix the problem. Everybody's got problems. And if you do it just like it's part of life, which it is, then you might be able to mellow them out. They can come back. Oh, I screwed up. No, it's okay. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And you just give them the information that will uplift them no matter how screwed up it is. Yeah. You still got to make a positive statement so they come back and they'll try it again.
And I get that the community reinforcement approach is a therapeutic structure, I guess.
And anybody can do it though, Darren. It's not rocket science,
So what is it like? What is their resource when they leave the office and they have that? I'm biased because I know what a community support, outside of therapy and all of that, or an hour-long meeting has done in my life. And so what is it that you guys implement as far as the rest of their day, let's say?
That's the big deal. The whole idea of sobriety to me is you got 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to work, and 8 hours to do stupid shit. You know what I'm saying? Sort of thing. So again, Alan Marlad, who's from BC area, you should know him. He's the king of certain not interventions, but of relapse stuff. And he says the biggest reason for relapse and getting into more trouble is negative emotional states, boredom, shame, all those things, depression, anxiety. So again, let's get rid of their anxiety problems. Let's get rid of some of their problems that they already have. then that's probably why some of them are using alcohol and other drugs. And again, and get them to titrate down over a period of time, because so many people need time to get away from the drugs. And you're right. Also, what we give them with CRA is skills. We teach them communication skills, how to solve problems. They can go to all the meetings they want to go to. They can find other groups if they want to do that as well. I've worked with Smart Recovery for many, many years, and the guy who developed it and started it many, many years ago was a good friend of mine out in California. But again, there's lots of things that work if we look for them and we use them. And again, if it doesn't work, then you try something else. One of the biggest problems I've seen with therapists actually, I've been doing this for 45 years, not 39, but nevertheless, the thing is somebody says, I said, well, what are you doing with the client? And they tell me they're doing this, that, and the other. What else are you doing? Well, nothing really. So what they do is they're doing the same thing that hasn't worked over and over again. And they do more of the same thing that doesn't work. And I say, try something different.
Yeah.
You don't have to do this if you don't want to.
You know what? One of the things I'm not going to speak for Darren, but for me, I've learned from this show. 7 years, we've talked to a lot of people, and the one thing that we always get is the passion people have. I've learned so many, like refuge recovery, smart recovery, yoga. We've had people on ayahuasca, literally on ayahuasca, on the show, and so you end up in this place where you're like, I feel gifted.
Yeah.
I had no idea this was where we were going to be at 7 years later, where it's just like, there's a lot of help out there. And there's this funnel, but unfortunately that funnel ends with grants, money, and who's got the loudest voice, who's going to, burn their hair on fire at City Hall, yelling, we need. The recovery community, unfortunately, once somebody gets clean and sober, if they do, they kind of disappear. They're not advocating for, more recovery. They get their jobs, they move on and all that. We've only got a few minutes left, so I hope I've never really asked this question, which I'm surprised. Evidence-based. So you've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I've got this weird feeling like evidence-based actually means who's got money. Am I crazy, or is it like real? Because I don't know, I see big pharma companies, lots of evidence-based about big pharma, and I'm kind of gotten to a place where, whenever I try to mention at that kids table the word recovery, it's like, that's not evidence-based. I'm like,
well,
I don't exist. So what do you think about that?
Well, I was a research professor, and I lived strictly off grants. I had another job at the university, and I made a commitment to Bill Miller was one of our first grants, and I'll switch from hard money to soft money. So I took the leap to come back. But you're right. The people who can get grants can do those things, and they can say these things actually work if you do them. But again, there's so many other things I think out there that people can do that anybody can do, and that's the thing. And AA and NA and all the different kind of things that are out there, those things work as well too. But I think you're right, partly right about that. But I never worked in a for-profit organization in my 46 years doing this kind of stuff because I wanted to help. I want to help people. I don't have to work. I got a VA pension. I got blown up. I was in a medevac hospital for 2 months over in Japan at one time, and I get my Social Security, and I can live okay. But I'm doing this, I do a lot of stuff free. If somebody says, well, we can't pay that much, I said, well, what can you pay? And then I do it because I want them to learn my skills. And then what I tell them is, look, I've worked with so many recovery coaches that they rock, man. They totally rock.
They do, yeah. Some do and some don't.
Yeah, and this is the same thing because I always talk about it. I certify people in craft. It's a process I do. I have manuals and I got coders. We can code tapes and all that stuff. And I tell people, well, who can get certified? I says, the people who can do the work. I don't care if you don't have a degree. I've worked with psychologists that stink in therapy, psychiatrists that stink in therapy. And then again, there's people that have no degrees that rock and roll. They're some of the best people I've ever worked with. So again, it goes back to compassion. Like both of you guys are compassionate about what you do. You want to give back to the world. And I think if we get more of us somehow.
I was just going to say that perfect modality of treatment has the most passionate person that has a personal agenda, from their heart, of every single treatment modality, harm reduction, all across the board, and say, how can we help anybody.
Yeah.
And that is the perfect treatment, because there's two, like you say, the big business that's involved, and then the, the political connections and, agendas there. It's all convoluted, and it never comes down to how do we help that guy on the street the same way that we help the pilot, the same way we help the mother. And there's a way to do it. There's a way to do it.
And another thing I really wish I could do more of, and I'm passionate about it, we need to start in middle school.
Yeah.
To train people how to use communication skills, problem solving, how to make decisions, how to make good choices. Life is only about choices, and you have good ones and you have bad ones. And again, the whole idea of letting kids know early on that there's no free lunch, life goes on. And as I get older, I've got different problems that I didn't have when I was young, but it's part of the process. And it's the same thing, I think, with people on the street. They need to be treated with enough courtesy. And again, I just think that so many people, and I think, excuse me, but a lot of them are Trump guys that really, they hate everybody. I mean, that I still don't get it. I don't get. I mean, I would go overseas and people would look at me like, how did you elect that man? Because
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And again, I don't want to get into politics and anything, but again, right now Biden is putting in more money. I got a letter from Bill Miller and stuff that he's putting in more money for alcohol and drug treatment and opiate treatments and stuff like that. And that's
I read his drug policy strategy for year one.
Yep.
And something we're working on is recovery capital. And we started a conference called the Recovery Capital Conference of Canada 5 years ago, and nobody knew what the heck we were talking about. You people are crazy. 7,000 healthcare workers later, after 4 years that have attended, but still our federal government is still not even mentioning the word recovery capital. But on page 8 of his policies, he's talking about recovery capital. And it's all the same thing. It's like, if you can drink and pay your rent and have a job and all that, that's great. But if you drink and lose the job and lose the wife and beat the wife, and maybe you should take a look at this, right? And just maybe. So we're really grateful to see that happening. Advocates in the States have obviously gotten that to somehow get into that document, but it's a beginning. I mean, it's one of those things where yesterday, in BC, they were handing out free drugs on the street, pure heroin, pure cocaine, and pure crystal meth, to kind of be a demonstration on why we need safe supply and all that. There's a few minutes left. I got to ask you this question. So say you are I don't know, maybe you're 19 when you came back from the war, you're using heroin in Chicago, and there was a little office at the corner that gave out pure heroin, taxpayer funded, for free. Whether or not the ethics of that is right or wrong, do you think you would have gotten out of there? That's a fear that people in recovery have.
I would use anything I could get my hands on. And I was, many years later, I talked to my brother and I said, do you think I was really addicted? And my brother laughed for about 20 minutes before he, fell out of the chair. And like I said, getting kicked out of my house, and being on the streets, I awakened a little bit. But yeah, if I would have had more dope, I got most of it in the medevac hospital. They gave me so many pills and shit like that.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, and the VA's like that, but they help me now. But at the same time, when
it's hard to answer.
I joined at 17 years old, and I was dumber than a rock, and I ended up, getting in trouble and having a lot of trouble overseas and whatever. But when I came back, I was just just friggin' mess. So, well, goodbye. Thank you, guys. I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the book, Motivating Substance Abusers to Enter Treatment. So how can people learn more about your book and so forth? Where do they buy it? How do they get copies?
Yeah, you can go online on Amazon, or you can go to my website. It'll take you to that. And again, they're both in paperback, and they're much cheaper than they used to be. And you can get different versions of both of the books, especially to get your loved one sober. You can get it many different ways. It's a really good book. I'm surprised it works so well. But again, anything that you can help a family member who's sitting there waiting for the other shoe to drop because they got a loved one who's maybe going to die with, I don't know. it's everywhere you go, you know, and there's just not enough resources and stuff. But you guys are doing a great job. Do you guys ever work with Greg Purvis?
No, I haven't. No,
He's
I'll
a
have
great
to.
guy. You should look up Greg Purvis, man. He's a cool dude. He lives, I think, still somewhere way at the end, Prince Edward Island or in
Right on.
some other place. Yeah, and I've worked with him for years, and he's certified as a craft individual guy, and we did CRA with some of his programs. So I give a shout out to him, but also he might be a good resource for you guys at some point in time. Just throw that back at you. But you guys rock, man. I really like
We try to have fun. You know, we have some opinions, but hey, we're always open, and we try to be as non-biased as possible. And we're just learning too. Hey, man, I'm just, you know, just a guy who used to smoke a lot of crack.
I change my PowerPoint almost every 6 months, 7 months, because I always tell people now, you guys come up with some good ideas, I'm going to steal them, you know, when I do training, because what I want to do is find out everything that we can possibly do to help those people get someone into treatment who says, screw you, I'm never going to treatment. That was my goal because of my mother and my father.
Yeah. And it's one of the biggest topics. It's one of the biggest feelings that causes powerlessness or uselessness for any family that has a drug addict, alcoholic, you know, mental health, you know, situation in their life. There's just, I mean, it's like I even have that thought when I look at my 5-year-old. Like, I've never had a 5-year-old before. Like, I don't know, I just have to tell myself I have no idea what to do. Read a book, talk to people that have been through it, and all of a sudden, it's the most common sense, realistic, compassionate approach that nails it on the head every time. And I just want to thank you so much and implore our listeners and viewers, Robert J Meyers, PhD.com. Check it out. That'll give you all the information. It'll show you how much research and investigation. And I mean, I thought you were just a data guy, Professor, when I was looking at some of the bio there. So I really appreciate you sharing your story and how it's become a compassion and a passion in your life.
Yeah, it was a long road, I'll tell you, from a 17-year-old dumbass kid who goes off to the military. First thing I end up in Vietnam, you know, stuff like that. But you know what? Here I am. I'm happy. You know, I'm living. I've got friends, and my kids are well. And again, there's no manual for raising a kid. That's for sure. You know, unfortunately, we don't have. There's no evidence-based treatment raising a kid. I hear you.
Exactly. Well, if you're listening to us on Vancouver Co-op Radio, thanks for listening to us, or you're watching us on Facebook Live. Looking forward to a post-COVID world where we're back in the studio and we can share microphones. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, guys. Great job. Great job. Thank you for having me on.
Good to see you, Darren. Take care. See you all next Thursday. Bye.